Hello everyone and welcome to the Blaugrana Everything podcast, I should say, because it's been a minute since I've done this, and like I said in my last upload, that match reaction for the win against Alaves, which felt like a loss. Yeah, that game, I did say I'll be getting into this, so that's what we're going to be doing today. It's going to be a nice long session where I'm going to talk about a lot of things, vent a little bit, give my thoughts as well. And before I get too much into that, just want to say that you're probably going to pick up a bit of background noise in this episode, and I apologize. I couldn't really do much about it. It just is what it is. I am recording from a room that's quite near to a kitchen, so there's a lot of activity going on, and you'll probably get a lot of background noise every now and then, but just bear with me, and yeah, we'll get through it all together. So in particular, what are we going to be looking at today? Like, what am I going to be rambling on about? Well, first of all, I want to talk a little bit more in depth about that Alaves game, just to give some of my thoughts on that match, everything that transpired, what exactly I thought about it. I did say that there were so many things I could have talked about if I got into like negatives, positives, or whatever. So like all those things I could have talked about, that's what I'm going to get into here. That's what I'm going to give you just a glimpse of exactly how I felt in the moment then, and how I'm feeling about it now that a couple of days have passed, and just my thoughts have marinated a little bit more, and matured, into a finer wine than they were before. And then of course we're going to look just at Barcelona's recent performances, and I'm looking specifically at every match Barca has played since that game against Celta de Vigo. I could say since about then, all the matches Barcelona's played, and some of the things which for me are concerning. And we'll be asking, like, where exactly are we supposed to apportion the blame? Like, who is responsible exactly for everything that's going wrong, and who should we point fingers at? Because fingers must be pointed. We're at that point. It's unavoidable. Fingers need to be pointed. So who are we going to point those fingers at? And then we're also going to talk a bit more about what else I think is next for Barcelona, not just the rest of this year of 2023, but just generally for the rest of the season. And depending on what might happen or might not happen, we'll get into more of that, and I'll explain exactly what I expect from Barcelona going forward. Alright, so without further of the ado, let's go straight and talk about that Alaves game, because what was that exactly that we saw from Barcelona? In particular, what was that in the first half? Now, the only thing that saves this match from being Barcelona's worst ever match is, of course, that second half improvement that we saw from Barcelona during the first 30 minutes, I would say, of the first half, and also the fact that, unlike Shakthar Donetsk, Barcelona were not poor for the entire 90 minutes, and they didn't just have one measly shot on target at the end of the day. Although, it wasn't that far off, by our standards in as far as, our shooting and our conversion in front of goal. I have to actually say that Alaves, that match was like a huge improvement on what Barcelona's finishing has been like for just generally the entire season, right? Okay, so let's start with what went wrong against Alaves, right? I mean, just from the start of this game, it felt like, as a fan, you were drinking from a poisoned chalice, It felt like the entire reason why this game existed was to just, inflict damage on your soul. Because just within 17 seconds, 18 seconds, I don't know which one it is, whichever one you want. Okay, it was less than 20 seconds. That's what matters. Couldn't even last half a minute without conceding a goal. And of course, as been parroted now, it wasn't the first time that this happened to FC Barcelona. It happened as well against Granada. I pointed that out as well in my match reaction. But then just looking at that first goal that looking at that first goal of that match, the goal that Alaves scored, the goal that Samu scored, you step back and you ask yourself what exactly was going on with the team, because from start nobody was prepared. Like, nobody. Okay, I'm not even saying like anybody. Like, nah, nobody was prepared. Nobody seemed ready. Okay. We've been told that one of the things which Barca were trying to do was to literally avoid starting a match like they did against Granada, which is ironic because it's exactly what Barca did. The intention this time around was for Araujo to go high and win a header. So, that didn't happen. But the thing is, the ball is still in Barcelona's possession, okay? Sure, you didn't win that first ball, but you got the second ball, right? Which is generally what you want, actually, when it comes to these aerial duels, okay? Like, you might not always win those aerial duels in midfield, but you want to be the first ones to that knockdown, which is exactly what Barcelona had. And what happened there was just complete and utter disaster from Ilkay Gundogan, one of the senior most players in this team. Like, he's the guy, okay? He was brought in to be the guy. Like, we couldn't get Messi. Xavi said, well, if I can't have Messi, give me Gundogan. Just to put it into your perspective of exactly what, the kind of air Gundogan breathes in Barcelona's sphere, okay? So he then, of course, messes up, gives that ball away to Guridi. Now, that's okay, okay? It can happen. You can miscontrol a pass, can go to the opponent. What do you have to do when that happens? You have to chase back. And Gundogan did try to chase back, but to be honest, anything more than a description that says half-hearted for that chasing back is just a lie. Because, he was half-hearted at best. And this is the part which, honestly speaking, when I was watching the entire sequence of the goal, the part which got to me the most wasn't actually Gundogan's poor control. It wasn't actually Joao Cancelo failing to close down Javi Lopez. No, but it was Gundogan just failing to make a tactical foul. He had Guridi right there in front of him, and he didn't do it. And look, sure, he would have gotten maybe an early yellow card, but it's literally taking one for the team to make up for an error. Do it. Okay? Just do it. Don't even hesitate. But of course, that isn't what happened. Then, of course, you know what happens next. Guridi runs, plays in Javi Lopez. Javi Lopez gets by Araujo, who was honestly just completely oblivious to what was going on around him. Didn't see the fullback bombing up the pitch behind him. He could have cut him off, could have cut off the pass even. But, pass reaches Javi Lopez and he squares in a box where Samu gets one of his many duels against Jules Koundé, which he wins. Oh, sorry, that was against Inigo Martinez this time around, which he won. He got ahead of Inigo and he scores. And all of a sudden, you're go down. Now, the reason why for me this was so perplexing is we all saw what happened against Shakthar. We all heard the criticism against Shakthar. We all heard what everybody was saying post-game and all the things they were saying they were going to be doing. Oh, we're bringing back positional play. Oh, the players just needed to be more committed and all this and all that. And all the players saying, woe is me, I need to get better and all that kind of stuff. And then within 30 seconds, within 20 seconds, 18 to be precise, you go ahead and this is how you're playing. Literally, the first 18 seconds of any match after Shakthar, which, Shakthar was a complete disaster. That was easily the worst match that I would say Barca have played under Xavi. And that's concerning when you consider the huge turnover in personnel that Xavi Hernandez has had since his first match in charge of Barca, which we're going to get to that later on when we're looking a bit more about Xavi and about maybe, I'll be playing a bit of devil's advocate here and there just to help the poor guy out because, he was crying in his post-match. You don't want to see that, okay? You don't want to see your manager crying in a post-match press conference. But then maybe that's reflective of the mentality in the squad, which we're probably going to get to here as being what I thought was the major issue here. The mentality, because you don't have a match like Shakthar and then just go into this game being even more careless than you were against Shakthar. That says something about the team's mentality. What exactly does it say? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, okay? I'll hold my hands up and say I don't know what exactly it says about the team's mentality, but it does say something, okay? And you can't dispute that. Let's just agree that I'm correct and move on. The mentality of the team isn't where it should be. Even by Xavi's admission, he said things like, the negativity from the press gets to these players, which is like, it's not a thing you want to hear your manager saying really about your players, because you wonder, like, what's that going to do to the confidence of these players, What exactly are these players supposed to pick up from that? Like, they're supposed to be encouraged from hearing their manager say that? I don't know. I don't think that's very, very encouraging at all. But, Xavi said what he said. And this is in the post-match for this Alaves game, which is, skipping a bit too far ahead, because there's still quite a lot more that was going on in this game, right? Samuel Omorodion, yeah, that's how it's pronounced, or just Samu, like everybody's going to call him, was literally terrorizing Barcelona every moment that he got. And we could say very easily that there was a very unbalanced shape Barcelona set up with, with Cancelo going pretty high to support João Felix, and Inigo Martinez as well going out wide to cover the space left by Cancelo to make a back three kind of thing. Now, personally, there's like a bit of a bittersweet taste in my mouth regarding the way Xavi has been using this back three and, over the past couple of games since Real Madrid. And personally, I predicted that Xavi is probably going to start playing a back three at Barca. And one of the things I had predicted was that one of the fullbacks is going to have to be sacrificed. Okay? Now, that was before we even had João Cancelo. So I didn't think the fullback that would be sacrificed would be Alejandro Balde. Right? But also, I didn't think that Barcelona shifting to a back three would still have them looking so stale in possession, because the whole point of moving to the back three, I felt, especially against teams with a low block, is to give you an extra body in midfield, somebody who can just, bounce off, someone you can bounce a pass off of as an attacker, which is exactly what Barcelona were not doing with João Cancelo and João Felix. Like, everything really looked so stagnant. Like, there's this one time when Lamine Yamal got the ball, and he was being double teamed by Rioja and Javi Lopez down that left wing of Alaves, and they were set up Alaves in their back four with that double team on Lamine Yamal, and up in front of him he had nobody ahead of him, he had nobody beside him. Araujo was just like sitting back because he was a stay-at-home right back. So that, I'm looking at Xavi Hernandez and I'm saying, like, something here isn't looking good for you, Xavi, in as far as how you're setting up. Because, okay, you can, like, I gave you the cheat code. You can just go back, watch my video where I was predicting how Barca would play this season. And I'm upset right now that I was correct. And the reason I'm upset is that I was correct that it would be a back three shape, but I was wrong that they would play well with the back three shape, which is honestly quite disturbing and also a bit surprising considering the opposition that we had and considering the fact that, they were going to sit in a whole deep block, and your best way around that is really just to stretch the pitch. So, two fullbacks would have been more appropriate. But hey, I'm not the coach. Xavi is, and I think Xavi needs to think a bit more like he's not the coach. This is what the coach is doing. Anywho, that, I think, the team mentality and the setup is basically the the big challenge that Barcelona had against Alaves. And if we go back as far as Celta, it's the same challenge that Barcelona had. Now, in that run from Celta to, Alaves, Barcelona had, of course, they beat Celta, they drew with Mallorca, they beat Sevilla, they beat FC Porto, they drew with Granada, they beat Bilbao, beat Shakthar, lost to Real, beat Sociedad, and lost to Shakthar. It's like, a whole mixed bag of results. Quite a few draws in there, quite a couple of losses, a lot of wins as well, yeah, sure. But how many of those wins had you feeling like, Barcelona were the team right now? Like, this is the team you need to beat. There's only one game, to be honest, and that was the loss to Real Madrid. Now, here I am, and I'm telling you that since the 5-0 win against Royal Antwerp, FC Barcelona has only played one good match, and that one match came against Real Madrid when they lost. Think about that for a second. Like, it's not a good look, definitely, and it's of great concern when you consider all of the investment that's been made in this team and how, it was basically built off the back of, just mortgaging the future away. Just straight up. That's what Laporta did so that he could be able to get all these signings, right? We all remember those deals Barcelona signed, those deals that made them sell, their TV rights and all that kind of stuff. This is where it's coming to bite you already in the back because you did all of that, but your performance is surprisingly worse now than they were then. How is that a thing? Why is this what is happening? Now, there is obviously quite a few things that you could throw into, the discussion here. Quite a few ingredients, have led to this very terrible pie that we are currently being served by FC Barcelona. And obviously, one of the things which Xavi has himself brought up in the past is the issue of injuries, right? I mean, look, it's no small thing losing players like Pedri, like Lewandowski, like Frankie de Jong, like Rafinha as well, Jules Koundé. It's not a small issue losing those players. And I would say, okay, fine. You can get away with using that excuse for some of the matches that we saw Barca play poorly in, right? Matches like Celta, for example, that's one where you felt like, yeah, if we had De Jong in that game, probably Aspas isn't on top of things so much, and we get to see a better version of Barca as a result. And the same goes as well for Sociedad. If you had De Jong in that game, and the Neo Clasico as well, things probably go a lot better for you. But my issue is that Barca struggled against teams like Granada, like Mallorca, who they should be able to outplay even without a Frankie de Jong. I said once, you don't need players who are the equivalent of, a footballing nuke to be able to beat teams that are struggling in the relegation zone. And it's no disrespect to Granada or to Mallorca because they did play a good game. They executed their tactics well. They got the goals that they deserved to score. Even with all of that, we know that come the end of the season, they're probably still going to be hovering around that, bottom half of the table and, most likely the bottom 5 or bottom 6. Okay, so teams in that territory shouldn't pose as much of a challenge for a Barca as they do, especially when they were not sitting in the low block. I can give Getafe to Barca and say fine. Getafe don't even play football. They were not even trying to play football in that game, and it's understandable that Barcelona struggled against them, especially since they're a mid-table team. They're not terrible, and also generally they're a bogey team. Getafe away from home is one of those fixtures for Barca of late. But that's not the case that we had here. Mallorca and Granada in particular, they were playing football. they looked better than Barcelona in some parts, including Ceuta as well. And we could say the same as well, once again, of Alaves. And Alaves, how many players did Barcelona have out injured, right? It's just Frankie de Jong wasn't available. Everybody else was. And a selection was made from those that were fit. And to tell me that that selection was not good enough to challenge Alaves for 90 straight minutes, like we needed to do a whole comeback in the second half. And even during the second half, by the end of the last 10 minutes, it was mostly Alaves that were on top of proceedings, They were the ones doing the attacking. And Barcelona was just hanging on and almost gave away a penalty just right at the death, right? Thanks a lot there to Mr. Oriol Romeu. And, looking at all of that, it's understandable why so many people right now are questioning Xavi. And they're saying, Xavi, big man, Wagwan, what's going on? What's happening, Xavi? Exactly what is going on here? And personally, I think that both Xavi, of course, and the players are to blame here. And you can assign the blame in whatever ratio you want, 1-1, 1-3, 2-1, whatever you want. Assign it however you want. But I think that we need to look at both Xavi and the players. Why am I saying the players? Because why are you failing to put a shot, for example, on target? Right? Like, match review after match review, I watch this team and I complain about one thing which you could guarantee almost every 2 match reviews out of 3 is going to have a section where in my negatives I talk about Barcelona's finishing. And how is that Xavi's fault, right? I mean, João Felix is the guy who tries to go for power too much rather than just, passing the ball into the back of the net and blazes shots over the top of the bar, right? That's not Xavi doing that in that moment. That's João Felix. Also because how many times now have we seen players come to Barcelona and really fail to perform under pressure? And that's really the thing that Barcelona needs the most. Barcelona needs people who can perform under pressure. It's one of the reasons why everyone is like, Barca was playing so much better when they had Adama Traores and whatnot running around, as opposed to now when they have, Rafinhas and Gundogans. And it's like, how good are Rafinhas and Gundogans when they're under pressure? Gundogan, for example, this is a guy who was Mr. Clutch just last season for Manchester City, so we expect that he's a guy who can operate under pressure, but look at him now. It's not happening. And so many other players, it's Lewandowski as well, it's Koundé as well, dropping like, a stinker when you don't expect it. So many players. The game before that against Shakthar, we saw Marcos Alonso and Christensen as well just absolutely get lost on the pitch and give up a silly goal. Let's not even talk about Oriol Romeu because I've complained so much about the poor guy right now. I don't want to look like I have an agenda against Oriol Romeu, so I'll just leave him alone for now. And of course, there's Xavi as well. Definitely, like I have said here, tactically, there's some things that were supposed to be happening that weren't. Honestly speaking, the decisions that you would have expected him to have made, that he didn't. And I can question, honestly, how much charge he has over that dressing room, how much power and how much control he has over that dressing room. It's different from when he arrived. When he arrived, it was unquestionable. Like, the biggest names in the dressing room respected him. The guys like Piqué, Jordi Alba, the guys who were, the big names in the dressing room then, they had so much respect for him, the Busquets. But now it's not so much the case. Like Gundogan, Lewandowski, I honestly don't know if Xavi has a lid on them. Just being honest. Same with Ter Stegen as well. I don't know if Xavi has a lid on him. But, let's assume that he does for now. And honestly speaking, for the people saying Xavi out, I understand where you are coming from. But personally, I think it's still too early to come up with, that kind of a Xavi out kind of slogan. I think he's done enough to warrant being given a bit more time, okay? He did come in at a time when very few people would have accepted to come to Barca. Like, no top manager would have accepted that job when Xavi took it. And none of them would have probably thought Barca would have made it to the Champions League, considering where they were when Xavi took over. But he took over, he got Barca playing well as well, and he got them moving up the table. And admittedly, recently, it's hard to watch what Barcelona is doing. But the honest truth is that there are a lot of things beyond just the limitations of Xavi's abilities, or the limitation of Xavi's ability as a manager, and having out of form or injured players, or just players who can't perform under pressure, that are contributing to Barcelona's current turmoil, or that's stopping Barca from playing at a high level. To play devil's advocate for a bit here for Xavi. Okay, Xavi, I did say I have your back in this one. So, let me just play devil's advocate for a short moment here, okay? How many players of Xavi's current preferred starting 11 had a full preseason with the team? Okay? I'll just, to help you narrow down, see how few they were. Gavi didn't have a full preseason. Gundogan didn't have a full preseason. Inigo Martinez didn't have a full preseason. Neither did João Cancelo nor João Felix. And currently that's half of the starting 11 that Xavi likes to pick. And because there's barely any time to coach tactics and passing sequences once a season kicks off, it means half of our current starting 11 are just, playing off of instincts and vibes. And that's kind of what we saw in those 2 5-0 wins. Lewandowski and João Felix, João Cancelo, Gundogan, these guys were just playing off of their instincts, and they gave us some pretty memorable moments in those 2 games, didn't they? Yeah, they did. But also, let's be careful not to let some of Joan Laporta's, rhetoric mislead us when, he says that there's no such thing as a transition year at Barca. Because look, for the past 3 seasons now, Barcelona has been a team rebuilding. It has been a team in transition. And since Xavi took over, he's had to work with over 40 different players. Okay? And he's gone into the start of each season without knowing his starting 11, because he had to wait till the 11th hour to know who would even be registered, to figure out who would actually be a part of his squad. Because just look at the players he had on his last match of preseason and look at the players he has now. It's 2 different squads almost. I can't think of even one instance where a manager has had to cope with so much instability within the club whilst still being expected to replicate, honestly, mythical footballing standards, People are expecting you to play Guardiola's Barcelona football, right? With a team that's still figuring itself out. I mean, look, if we look at Guardiola, even him at Manchester City, with all of the resources he's had, it took him 3 to 4 seasons to establish Man City as a Champions League semi-final caliber team. And Xavi isn't as blessed tactically, should I say managerially, as Pep. And Barca isn't as blessed with riches as Manchester City, okay? Man City are financially stable. We're not. The squad Barca has now, after 2 summers of ambitious signings, still pales in comparison to what City had when they made that first semi-final under Pep. But even away from City, you can look at how long it took for Jurgen Klopp to establish Liverpool as a powerhouse. About 5 seasons or so, right? Before we could start consistently saying, yeah, Liverpool are Champions League favourites. And now we are expecting this team with, that's been put together in a hurry, with not too much preseason, with not too much training. We're expecting this team to go from disgraceful to exhilarating just because we spent big and we brought in some big names like Gundogan and Lewandowski. well, Chelsea and PSG are already proof that that just isn't how it works in football. And as for why Barca under Xavi are worse now than they were back in 2021-22, I'll honestly be willing to revisit that question once Xavi has had these players with him during the winter break to probably coach some tactics into them. Because when we're looking at my prediction for Barcelona's season, the way it's going to go, I think that if Xavi is still Barca manager come the winter break, then I think Barcelona are going to improve quite a lot, quite drastically, because for starters, they'll look like a team that's been coached with tactics that make sense, right? They won't look like what we saw against Alaves, where people aren't watching runners, people are failing to support their winger out wide, leaving him isolated. We won't be seeing any of that stuff. And, lest we forget, Xavi came into Barcelona right before the winter break of 21-22, and during that winter break, he was able to work closely with the squad. So, if he can do the same thing, I have no doubts that Barca can return from the winter break well rested and also playing some proper football. Because, again, last season, this isn't something that Xavi had the chance to do, right? Last season, preseason was pretty short, and again, he didn't even know who he's going to have. And there was no winter break because we had a World Cup. So this time around, that could be something that he does get to have, what's the word I'm looking for? Luxury of a winter break, during which time he can coach his players. So if by some miracle, the team can stay free of injuries during that winter break and Xavi can work with all of them, then I'm willing to bet that after that winter break, the team will return playing some very good football. And if Barcelona are still, crap after January, then we can begin to suggest things like Xavi can't handle the dressing room and Xavi isn't good enough to be an FC Barcelona manager. So, yeah, I think I've ended up talking quite a bit more than I anticipated that I would, which I don't know if that's a good thing, or if that's a bad thing, or if that's a meh thing. I don't know. You guys can let me know if you're listening to this on YouTube. Just put it in the comments. And if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms, Spotify or whatever, thank you first of all for having listened to this far. And please give a brother a review, okay? Just give me 5. You don't even have to say anything. Just give me 5 stars and say Blaugrana everything. And that's cool for me. I don't mind it. Anywho, that's basically that for what I had. I think I've been able to speak at great length and get things off of my chest. Moving forward, I'm very much cool. I'm settled. Obviously, we'll have to wait now. There's a boring international break we'll have to endure before we have to then endure some, squeaky button moments, because Barca's schedule after the international break, Rayo Vallecano, who are a bogey team for us, away as well, where we haven't won since Rayo were promoted. Yeah, and where Ronald Koeman lost his job. Yep, then after them, it's FC Porto at home, and it's our chance to seal everything. And following that, it's Atletico de Madrid and Girona. And so, all these matches are going to be I think it's 3 weeks, a 3-week period, something like that. Yeah, the first match is on the 28th of November. The last one is on 10th of December. So, it's a pretty packed schedule. And, well, let's see how Barcelona handle it. Starting with Rayo. I don't know if maybe that's the game where Xavi is going to actually give some rest to guys like Gundogan. Hopefully, he can do that. But yeah, it's a pretty fun run actually. And I just noticed that after Girona, Barcelona go away to Mestalla. So even more fun. Anywho, let me know your thoughts, like I said, on all of this. And aside from all of that, I thank you for tuning in. Do have a great day, and Forza Barca.